Kamala Harris just revealed her plan for a better America, and if you haven't registered to vote yet, I guarantee you that this video will make you want to do that. Kamala Harris wants to give first-time homebuyers $25,000 to help with their down payment on a new home. While I know a lot of people my age might get excited about that, I consider a policy like this an effort to blatantly buy votes. But even for young people, though, this is a bad idea. By giving everyone $25,000 for their first home, you're just gonna make home prices go up by the same amount. Basic economics show you that you cannot artificially boost demand without addressing the supply. Plus, who is footing the bill for all this? We are. That's the truth, we are. And I imagine that you're also not too thrilled about that. According to Zillow, home buyers in 2024 need to earn $47,000 more than they did in 2020. A $25,000 handout doesn't cover that gap. It forces people who can't afford a home to subsidize somebody else's. This program is going to cost taxpayers a fortune. Let's just do the math quickly. Let's consider this. There were roughly 1.3 million first-time home buyers in 2023. Multiply that by 25,000 and you're looking at $32 billion. If you want to curb inflation, this is not the way to do it. Harris does kind of have a plan to increase supply. She wants to build 3 million government-owned homes. This aligns her with far-left politicians like AOC and Bernie Sanders, who previously suggested a Green New Deal for public housing with a price tag as high as $172 billion. But don't just take my word for it. Listen to Senator Tim Scott absolutely tear apart Kamala's communist agenda here.
The Democrats, led by Kamala Harris, have no understanding of the private sector. They have no clue on how to run the greatest free market economy in all of the world. I don't know why they don't remember 2007 to 2008. The American people are smarter than Kamala Harris when it comes to the economy. When you artificially stimulate the economy by the federal government and the Democrats spending trillions of dollars, the net effect is high inflation, high interest, high demand, and lower supply. That combination has led to the price gouging that people are experiencing today comes at the hands of Kamala Harris. Plain and simple. You cannot put trillions of dollars into our economy and not expect prices to go up.
And I know what home ownership means. And sadly, right now, it is out of reach for far too many American families.
Oh man, I wonder who's been in office for 4 years and could have made home ownership more accessible. And yet, the next part of her plan is even worse. Grocery stores only had a 1.2% profit margin last year, when the industry average is 8.5%. But Kamala thinks that they're price gouging. Now let's just define price gouging because I'm sure Kamala hasn't. Price gouging is when a company or individual charges an unreasonable or unfair price for a product or service, usually after a supply or demand shock. For example, during a natural disaster, demand for certain products may increase, while supply may decrease. This could lead to price gouging if companies take advantage of the situation by charging higher prices. Now, with that being said, Kamala has brought a lot of attention to rising grocery store prices. So much attention, in fact, that Trump has turned it into a campaign ad.
A loaf of bread costs 50% more today than it did before the pandemic. Ground beef is up almost 50%.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.
So Kamala wants to combat these rising prices that are clearly due to inflation with price controls. She wants the government to come in and tell grocery stores how much they should charge for milk. When the government imposes price controls, it sets prices below the natural market level. This makes it unprofitable for producers and sellers, leading to decreased production and supply. As a result, you will see shelves in stores become empty because there are fewer goods available. And guess what happens to the quality of your food? It goes down because suppliers cut corners in production to save costs on food. That's going to make you sick, and although Kamala promises to pay off your medical debt, I don't think you want to be a regular at the hospital. But you can ask people in Venezuela how price control is working for them. They'll tell you that they can only go to the supermarket with their ID cards because of an effort to prevent black market reselling. They'll also tell you that they have to wait in long lines to get essentials like diapers, which require a birth certificate to buy. And guess what? People resell the grocery store products anyway for much more, and of course, a full black market emerges. This is what happened to the actual prices of groceries after Maduro implemented price controls. If grocery stores were truly price gouging in the US, they'd have a lot more than a 1.2% profit margin. This policy from Kamala is so frightening that even the Washington Post, who effectively works as Kamala's second press secretary, has said this: when your opponent calls you communist, maybe don't propose price controls. And CNN, who is so biased that when Stephen Colbert interviewed Caitlin Collins, his own audience laughed at him when he called her network objective.
I know you guys are objective over there, that you just report the news as it is. Oh, I know. CNN makes a... I know.
Was that supposed to be a laugh line?
I wasn't supposed to be, but...
Yeah, so even that network has called out Kamala's new economic policy to be absolutely insane. Take a look.
Nobody can explain what price gouging means. It's like that old line about pornography. I know it when I see it. In the sense that, what does it mean to have an excessive price or an excessive profit margin? That seems to be shorthand for a price or a profit margin that bugs me, that seems too high. So, it's very hard to pin down what this would actually mean. If you look at the legislation that, as I mentioned, is already in the Senate, led by Senate Warren and Senator Bob Casey and a slew of others, the particular way that this is written, which is likely to be the template for any proposal that Harris would eventually embrace, is especially bad in that it just bans excessive prices, grossly excessive profit margins, and says that the Federal Trade Commission can use any metric it deems appropriate to decide what that would mean. Which basically says, like, it's not going to be markets, it's not going to be supply and demand that's determining how much your grocery store charges you for milk or for eggs. It's going to be some bureaucrat in D.C., which seems like totally unworkable, first of all, for the FTC to be deciding, like, how much Kroger charges for eggs in Michigan. But it also would be very bad for markets. We've seen this kind of thing tried in lots of other countries before: Venezuela, Argentina.
So we've covered making you pay for someone else's house and forcing grocery stores to go out of business. What else? Yes, medical debt. In another desperate attempt to buy votes, Comrade Kamala has proposed to refund millions of dollars in medical debt to the American people. What could go wrong? I'll start. If people expect their medical debt to be forgiven, people will be a lot less responsible for their health. They'll also realize that they can use the hospital as a hotel and get a free night in their city of choice. Next is that refunding medical debt does not address the actual underlying issue, which is that healthcare is very expensive. Without actually changing how the system works, this is just going to lead to significantly higher taxes for everyone watching this video. Maybe you've been very sick before, or someone you know has been very sick. You paid your bills. Now, how would you feel knowing that others wouldn't have to? Probably not great. A large portion of this country will perceive this new policy as extraordinarily unfair. You should also be very aware that this is another policy that Bernie Sanders has insisted on. The more policies that she has that aligns with him, the higher likelihood that he'll be in the cabinet. That should scare you. And if it doesn't, look up successful socialist countries. Your research will wrap up very quickly. I mean, this is directly from the far left. Last week, Senator Sanders and Rep. Ro Khanna introduced the Medical Debt Cancellation Act, which would impact over 100 million Americans. This legislation, if passed, would wipe out over $220 billion in medical debt. Now, my question to you is, do you want to pay for that? Now, while you think on that, I want to be honest with you. This whole thing is likely to not pass in the Senate, which brings me to my earlier point, which is that please don't be fooled by this blatant attempt to buy votes. But on the off chance that it does pass, let's gather Kamala's policies to combat inflation. Student debt forgiveness, medical debt forgiveness, $25,000 for first-time home buyers, price controls on food, and billions of more dollars to Ukraine. Wonder how that will work out. Last but not least, the only policy that I actually agree with her on, which is happens to be, completely stolen from J.D. Vance, which is child tax credit. Yes, we should incentivize people to have children because we have a birth rate crisis. The funny thing is that J.D. proposed a $5,000 credit, where Kamala just had to propose $6,000. So between copying Trump for no tax on tips and now J.D. with child tax credit, any policy of hers that you end up liking is probably just a Trump policy. If you like this episode of The Nate Friedman Show, I've got some other ones on the channel, and they're alright. Maybe you'll like them. I'll see you there.